Floating. We can make elements float. Not the usual Chris Angel type of float, though, where he hovers over a building or from building to building. What I mean is that we can make an element squeeze beside other elements. So before we do anything, let's look at the property. It's called float. It accepts left, right, inherit, and none. Left, the element will move as far left as it can, and it allows other elements to flow to the right of it. Right, the element will move as far right as it can and allow other elements to flow to the left of it. And none is default. So what is float? Floating elements are pushed to one side and allow another element to flow around it. All the elements that float will float horizontally, which is your left and right, and they will all move as far right or as far left as possible and against other floating elements. Now this might not make sense right now, but we'll get into it. So when you float an element, you're allowing everything to be beside it. However, there are a couple different outcomes. Elements after anything that floats will flow around or beside it, and elements that are before the floating elements will not be affected whatsoever. Now let's look at what a left float does. Here we just have some text. It's nothing important, you don't even need to read that. The text above is a sample to show you how it flows around the left star image. Now here's the CSS for the star image above. All we did was we added border, 1 pixel solid, CCC color, floated it left, and we gave it a height and width. Now really, it should always be wrapped like that, otherwise it's not going to have any effect on anything. Now the star image, I believe the code is actually right in between here. This highlighted section, that's where the star actually is, the image. And it just floats right to the left and allows everything to move beside it. Similar to a magazine article. Now let's look at right. Same thing. Although this one doesn't look as great, and that's because, well, for example, we have a great big blank space right here. That's because we have a large word that doesn't fit. So it's going to be pushed onto the next line. So again, the CSS would be, your class or your ID. You could even just put it in the style attribute. We gave it a 1 pixel border, we floated it right, and same height and same width. And here I believe we actually put the image, this is hard to highlight, there we go, right about there, and it floats it all the way right from where it is in the code. Now we inserted the image into both paragraphs right in the middle, not before and not after the paragraphs. The line we wrote the image tag on is a line that the image is going to be on, but it's going to be pushed either to the left or to the right, and it's going to allow everything to flow beside it. And all we did was we added the float right or the float left declarations. You can float elements beside each other too, to create a small gallery-like page. But remember, the float property will only align elements beside other float elements if there is room on that line. Otherwise, it will move to a new line. Now, if you have something that floats, or you have a gallery of images, for example, and you want to put some text in there and you don't want it to float with the text, you actually want it to be on a different line, we can do that too. And we're going to go over that in the next class.